There is also a very interesting topic, so it's a new initiative or need or must, this new center you develop, and being I understand not head of that center, but still a head of working group to create that kind of center. Mr. Kiukucāns works for the Ministry of Defense of Latvia, and particularly on this kind of things. So just say that we are not like lacking behind of some other countries, or just describe the situation if you compare why this center is needed if we have CERT. I mean, I was always like satisfied with having CERT. They are safeguarding my needs, or now we will have like two agencies doing more or less the same, or how you divide the tasks they should undergo, please.
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Honored to be here. Also accepting the challenge of having a presentation right after the lunch, which is never easy. Hope that you will not fall asleep. I will also answer the question that Aisteres raised, but a bit later in the presentation. I will start today with this slide. So the international cooperation in cybersecurity. You see many different logos, many different formats, how we can cooperate. But what does it mean in practice? That is what I want to maybe explain and talk about today here. So this date, 24th of February, you can see on the screen the Russian forces entering Ukraine. Well, of course, this date, this war, it has changed the thinking at all levels, of course, including also cybersecurity. I think that for many, there was an idea, perception that this would be the first major cyber war. But it really wasn't at the end. I think that the conclusion after this, or after the first seven months of the war, is that cyber is still a supporting element of a conventional war, but you cannot win the war only with cyber at this stage. And I'm talking now in 2022. This doesn't mean, of course, that in the future this will not change. It might change, of course, but I'm talking about the situation right now. So going a bit to the national level, so what happened here in Latvia, I think many of the speakers talked about it today already. But of course, what we saw was lots of activity, big noise, as we call it, scanning, DDoS, phishing. But our main conclusion so far is that the impact on essential services was low. So, and maybe many of you would ask the question, why? And I think that the answer is that, well, we were ready. Because already in 2007, when the first major cyber attacks happened in Estonia, I think that already started to change the thinking. Another important milestone was the Latvian EU presidency in 2015. Because it was our first EU presidency, of course, we took it very seriously, and we understood that because of what happened in Estonia, this would be a natural target. The successful implementation of the presidency. That's why, of course, the awareness was raised and practical actions also followed. But of course, I also don't want to put you like pink glasses on your eyes. Still a lot has to be done. There are still many challenges, and I think one of the main challenges is that this field in itself is changing very rapidly. It is a field that where you cannot say that, okay, we did something 2 years ago, now we're ready for everything. No, you have to follow all the trends all the time, what is happening, and then you might say that you are more or less ready, but I don't think that we can be always ready for everything that might come. So I started with all of those logos, and now I want to put them somehow in some kind of order and to maybe explain how does it actually work. Up until 24 February, in EU, in NATO, and in many other international forums, we have worked a lot on creating information exchange mechanisms. We have created several mechanisms that should work during the crisis, like CERT network. In NATO, we also exchange information through MISP platform. So also Cyclone, that's quite a new thing in the EU, where you can also share information somewhere between the technical and political level. And I think that this really was an exam for all of what we have created. And it actually worked. And I think from the MOD part, we can say that this information sharing, we have talked about it a lot. Like I've also spent 3 years back in Brussels, and I remember that in every document everyone was always putting that, yes, we need to have this information sharing, that it's very important. And everyone was saying, but what does it actually mean? So that is what it actually means. It means that you share the information and the others will share with you as well, because it's a two-way street, of course. And that's how we need to make these mechanisms actually work. So we get some information, but we also give some information. And that's, I think, the most important thing. And what I also want to mention is that you would think, okay, you share information, but what happens then? I think that the most important thing is that it actually we can use that information to prevent attacks, to prevent the use of some vulnerabilities that we might have, because we have actually used information what other allies and EU partners have shared with us, so that we don't get in trouble. And we have done the same. We have shared information from our networks, and that has been valued, of course, by our partners. And then jumping to the EU and NATO cyber policy and actions. You probably start to see EU documents and you already start to fall asleep, but I'll try to keep you awake and keep it very short. As I mentioned, of course, info sharing, I will not repeat it again. But then, of course, the cyber diplomacy, and that has also been mentioned before today. That's also an important part, both in EU and NATO, that you come together with your partners, you understand who has been behind the attacks, and you can then together decide what to do and how to impose costs on those who have carried out these attacks. Either it's public announcement, attribution, or even further like sanctions, but this is a crucial part also of the EU and NATO cyber policy. But then again, exercises is another very crucial part of this policy, of the cooperation that we have with EU member states and with NATO. You need to exercise, especially at the international level, because different member states have different ways of dealing with crisis, and you have to understand how you put all those different approaches together, how you act when a serious cyber incident has happened. What do? How do you interact with other member states? How do you use the available support mechanisms? That is everything. We have all of that on paper, but we have to also exercise how we actually can use those mechanisms and those information sharing formats. That's why we have numerous national exercises, EU exercises, NATO exercises, in which we actively participate to be able to understand what are we actually doing during the crisis. And then when it comes to the legislation part, that's a very big story. And after me, there'll be a representative from the European Commission. I think he'll be very competent to explain a bit more about all the EU legislation. But I will just touch upon it. So many of you have probably heard about the Network Information Security Directive. We have one already, but the review of it is coming up. And it will be published very soon, should be end of October or beginning of November. The NIS2, as we call it, that will be, I would say, an important milestone in the EU's approach to cybersecurity. It very much widens the scope of the entities that are falling under this directive, which also means that the scope of the entities that we should follow nationally and monitor and check if everything is according to the security requirements is also being widened, which means more work for both the entities, but also for us, the Ministry, and also the CERT.LV. A bit more recent is the Cyber Resilience Act. That is also something that the European Commission has come up quite recently, still in negotiations, so I will not be able to explain a lot of details about this document, but that's another document that should give a contribution to the security of supply chain in the IT sector. So I think these two are very important documents right now that are shaping our work not only internationally at the EU level, but also then nationally. And then we come to a part which is probably very interesting to both the national member states, but also of course different academia representatives, as well as business and private sector. So the EU funding programs. Right now, I could point out two. One is Digital Europe, which has started to being implemented in this multinational financial framework, which is basically the EU budget for 2021-2027. It's more than 1 billion euros available to all the member states. I will talk a bit more about how are we implementing this nationally later, but the main line here is that money will be available both to government, to private sector, in order to increase our level of cybersecurity. And then the emergency fund, that is something that came up right after the war in Ukraine started. Those were the telecom ministers who agreed that EU needs an emergency fund in order to be able to support member states in raising their level of cybersecurity. That is still also on the side of the European Commission, how this will actually look like. But in any way, we, at least at the MOD, but I think also in other institutions, are eagerly waiting to see how this fund will actually look like. And last but definitely not least is the support that we can get through ENISA, the European Network Information Security Agency. I can say that from my own experience that the work with ENISA has been very beneficial to us, of course, and it's a very important support that they can provide to the member states. It's information, it's advice, education and training, also practical support, and that is, I think, something that we can really say that it's something good that has come out of the EU, that we have an agency that is actually working and actually supporting EU member states. And then when we jump from the international to national level, I already said about the information sharing to partners. We have tried to do it as much as possible. I think we have succeeded also in that. We have shared as much as we can, and I think that has also been valued by the partners. But then, from what I said before about the EU legislation, that of course has to somehow correspond at the national level as well. So starting with the national cybersecurity law that we're working on right now, this will replace the existing IT security law, basically implementing the provisions of the NIS2 directive, like widening the scope of entities or having the mandatory coordinated vulnerability process, cyber hygiene guidelines, etc., etc. So there are quite many things from the NIS2 that we have to implement also nationally. But what I want to stress is that we are not saying that we don't want to do it. We definitely want to implement the NIS2 because we also see that this is an important task to do, and it will be beneficial for all of us, even though it might be quite a challenge to actually implement it. And then, of course, the national cybersecurity law will include the creation of the National Cybersecurity Center that Ansys mentioned a bit earlier when I just before my presentation. And about the center itself, I will talk a bit in the next slide, but the general idea is, of course, that this law will include a clear mentioning that the National Cybersecurity Center is the one who is responsible for cybersecurity in the state, because until now, the legislation does not provide a clear picture of who is responsible for what nationally in the area of cybersecurity. This also includes a new model for cyber governance and control of entities. This changes a lot in how we are going to do things, but also it will allow us to hire more people, and hopefully we will succeed in that. And Baiba said that they will be hiring, we will be too. So, people with Latvian citizenship, you are very much welcome. If you have IT background, we'll be definitely willing to see you work for the MOD as well. But the information will follow, of course. And finally, we have also created a National Coordination Center for the European Cybersecurity Competence Center. Sounds terrible and very difficult, but in practice, this is an entity that should help to implement the Digital Europe funding in Latvia. So basically, this entity will be responsible for finding the projects, getting them approved in the government, getting through all the process of selection, so that we have someone from A to Z, an entity who is able to implement this program nationally. So, but that we have already created. That's already in the Ministry of Defense, and if you need some contacts, those can be found on MOD website. But more on the cybersecurity governance reform. This has been approved by the Cabinet of Ministers already in summer, in June. So, as I said already, the establishment and development of National Cybersecurity Center is one of the main things there, but that's, of course, not the only thing. What we have started to do already is to evaluate national IT information systems and to check if they are being built according to the minimum security requirements. And that is an important thing because quite often we see that if we're looking if we're looking at the building of the information system, like building a house, our state secretary has always said that, well, we usually build a house, nice house, everything's beautiful, but at the end we somehow forget to put the key in the door. And that has been the problem for a long time. So for now, we have changed the situation. We have a very clear rule that no information system can be developed without the approval from the MOD, saying that, okay, here everything with the security requirements is done according to the rules. Then, as I said, of course, also the NIS2 directive is another big challenge that we have to accept. We don't have any other choice, and it's good, because we will have to monitor all the subjects under this directive. We will have to create a structured and systematic way of checking how all the security requirements are being implemented, both in government but also private sector. That will be a big challenge, of course, but therefore we also are building the National Cybersecurity Center with more workforce to be able to do it. Then on the lower side of the slide, you can see three other very important elements. First one, the establishment of competence centers. So new government policy has been approved, and this is an initiative by the Ministry of Regional Development and Environment, that all the state IT systems and resources will be maintained in data collocation centers, which we of course support very much. And then the task for the MOD there is to define the security requirements for these centers. So that is another big task that we have to do, and we'll have to do it very soon. But I think this is also a very beneficial idea and an important decision by the government that has been made. And then on the CERT side, security operations centers, they will also have those in the newly established competence centers in order to be able to detect some vulnerabilities or potential malicious activity as soon as possible. And finally, of course, the additional staff and also more competitive salaries, I would say, because for a very long time we have struggled with specific specialists, and we had to understand how we can get those specialists to the MOD, and now, of course, the law on the state sector salaries has been changed, and therefore I think it will be possible, hopefully, to get more people. I'm looking at the watch, and I see that I need to speed up a bit. So my final point is on the cybersecurity strategy. That's a document that we also need to approve by the end of the year. I think that is going to be an important task. First of all, to describe the new governance model, the reform. I think that's the job that we're going to have for the next 3 years, because okay, we're going to create a center, but that is not how the work ends. We need to get people. We need to create this structured system, how we're checking all the subjects of the NIS2 directive, etc., etc. So this will be an important part. But then, of course, also combating cybercrime, where we work together with the Ministry of Interior, international cooperation, and the rule of law in cyberspace. There, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has an important role, strengthening resilience, but also then raising societal awareness and education and research. those all elements build something together that we call a high level of cybersecurity, and I hope and I'm certain that we'll be able to deliver by 2026. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you. Nevertheless, there is an opportunity for questions. Whoever wants clarifications or something, we still have a time. I'd like, of course.
I'll jump to the mic again, and I just want to make one comment and to make it very clear, because some people asked me in the break, and I think there is still some uncertainty. So I just want to clarify that National Cybersecurity Center will consist of two parts. CERT.LV will be one part of it, and the department in the Ministry of Defense will be the other part of the center. So the idea is to have the common name for the cybersecurity agency, but that does not mean that we will not be there or that we will change those good things that are already happening. Don't worry, we will not break what is working. We'll just try to enhance things that maybe are not working properly at the moment or that are not there yet. So the goal really is not to break what is working, but really improve the situation altogether in the country. So thanks a lot, Edgars, for the presentation, and well, we have big things to do in the future together.
Just to clarify, kind of clear things maybe for you guys, but now I know that not everyone who is in danger actually can ask for help, because technically up until now it was of course governments, official organizations, or so. By enlarging the scale, do you enlarge also the scope of whom you are covering? Can I, as a private person, if someone threatens my private computer, come to you or to you? Where should I go?
Anssi, you can come at any time. Anyone can. No, anyone can. And we are helping, of course, as much as we can, as much as resources we have, also to end users, to small and medium entities, to everyone. Those that are our primary constituents, state institutions, local municipalities, critical infrastructure, they have also obligations. It's not just our duty to help them, but they have a lot of obligations and requirements. For those that are not our direct constituents, we are there to help as much as we can in consulting, in helping to prevent cyber incidents, etc., etc. I don't know if you want to add something. Sorry.
No, exactly. I think Baiba explained everything very well. But the main idea, of course, of this widened scope is that those are the entities that will fall under our control, to say it in a very simple words. Everyone still can come to CERT.LV if they have not any problems, but cybersecurity related problems.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry if I may, just one small thing. I think also it's quite important to say that Baiba explained very well the whole formation of this National Cybersecurity Center, and I think that's the very important part is the personnel that should increase, because right now, well, if we're talking about 40 people that are dealing with cybersecurity, we should come to close to 90 by the beginning of 2025. So that's quite a substantial increase, and we hope, of course, that we will be able to fill all those.
Will they wear uniforms or not? Because, you know, being part of kind of a specific ministry.
They always can. There's an option if you work at the ministry or wherever else, you can always apply to the National Guard to be there. Either National Guard or also the cyber defense unit, which is in the National Guard. So that's always an option.
Okay, of course. Yes, please. Your question.
If I may have a question once again. When talking about the regulation, there are always risks to over-regulate something, having like local requirements, regional requirements, international requirements, and don't you see the risks that we end up developing our incident response plans in a way that it will satisfy, let's say, 5 different incident reporting requirements instead actually on focusing on containing the actual incident?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's also a very important point. I believe that firstly, Well, we are not doing any like double reporting. What is asked by the NIS2, we will not implement anything more or doubling something nationally. So the main aim of the NIS2 is to reach a even level of cybersecurity in the whole EU. So that's why then the member states, they have of course some kind of freedom as well how to actually implement it. In some points of course it's quite strict how you should implement it, but there are different ways. But in no way we are creating a double mechanism for reporting or additional bureaucracy. At least we're trying to avoid it as much as possible.
Yes, please do. It's a time when we have to spend money for oil and gas and all that stuff. Okay, no more questions? There will be some, no. And by the way, when you come, Baiba will shake your hand and give you a small gift. Why not? Please.